Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you kindly for stopping by. The link for all the MindSpeak sessions we've had so far this year. The latest was, of course, Charles Ireland of East African Breweries. Prior to that, Dr. Titus Naikuni of Kenya Airways, and of course, Christine Lagarde, who kicked the year off for us in early January. All those links are under Rich TV if you care to have a look. My macro thoughts are a little bit counterintuitive, but I think you buy Russia. Obviously, you've got to be fairly tactical, and I'll come to explain why. Home thoughts, going backwards, I read The Bleeding Edge by Thomas Pynchon, and then I can't remember the name of the other book I read as well. I'm now reading Inherent Vice, and two quotations from there. It had been dark at the beach for hours. He hadn't been smoking much, and it wasn't headlights. But before she turned away, he could swear he saw light falling on her face, the orange light just after sunset that catches a face turned to the west, watching the ocean for someone to come in on the last wave of the day, into shore and safety. From the same book, last apricot light flooded landward and brought their shadows uphill, past the lifeguard towers into terraces of bougainvillea, rhododendrons and ice plant. And my final home thought is about the snow peaks of Switzerland, which a photograph I took 11 days ago. Political reflections, let me start with this. Take a look around and you'll see a world at the boiling point. From Ukraine to Syria, South Sudan to Thailand, Libya to Bosnia, Turkey to Venezuela, citizen protest is sparking not just disorganization, but what looks like, to coin a word, de-organization at a global level. Yesterday, breaking news was that the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, Alexander Vitko, had given Ukrainian military forces in Crimea until 5 a.m. local time Tuesday to surrender. The bases in the Crimea would be stormed. This was from Interfax. Subsequent to that, I think they did not come through on that deadline so far, as far as I'm aware. President Obama said on Monday that Russia was on the wrong side of history with its incursion into the Crimean Peninsula. The Moscow stock market fell 10.8%, wiping nearly $60 billion off the value of Russian companies. Central bank apparently spent as much as $12 billion of its reserves to prop up the ruble. Putin declared at the weekend he had the right to invade Ukraine to protect Russian interests and citizens. Moscow's UN envoy told a stormy meeting of the Security Council on Monday that Ukraine's ousted leader, Viktor Yanukovych, had sent a letter to Putin requesting he uses Russia's military to restore law and order in Ukraine. And my conclusions are this. There is a certain foul naif posture in the reporting. Who in their right mind would have expected Putin to roll over in this matter and give up his Black Sea naval fleet, which is of course headquartered in Sevastopol? Ukraine is a breadbasket, a natural gas choke point, a nation of 45 million people in a pivotal spot north of the Black Sea. Ukraine matters to Russia, Europe, the US, and even China. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who I do admire, said famously once, "Without Ukraine, Russia ceases to be a Eurasian empire." Last year, Russia's state-controlled Gazprom sold about 160 billion cubic meters of natural gas to Europe, a quarter of European demand, and half of that traveled through a maze of Ukrainian pipelines. And then I came across this on Global Research. From the moment the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the United States has relentlessly pursued a strategy of encircling Russia, just as it has with other perceived enemies like China and Iran. That's why I like using that photograph I took of Ai Weiwei's installation of the snake, because for me it encapsulates the idea of the encirclement. I've been speaking about it with respect to China, but I think the same thing is being applied in Russia's case. Security Council members attend a meeting on the crisis in Ukraine at the UN headquarters in New York. I'll put up a photograph that was taken by Reuters. So, I mean, from my perspective, I think, there was just no way Putin could give up, roll over, lose his access to the sea. And in that respect, I think, the consequences we now find ourselves in are ones that were entirely predictable. And I also think, as I said yesterday, that this template of working at the periphery, chipping away, as it were, is proving very interesting, and it was applied in the Middle East, is now being applied in Russia, and I think eventually on China's border as well. But what's interesting is that the US feels comfortable, pivoting to Asia in one moment, and at the same time pressurizing Russia at another moment. Interesting piece by Pankaj Mishra, who says, does Thailand want to be the next Ukraine? Saying the spectre of succession suddenly haunts Ukraine and Thailand, two countries where demonstrators have uncompromisingly battled corrupt or unresponsive rulers. Militant protests have set off chain reactions that may result in the fracturing of national territories and the creation of new states in what are now eastern Ukraine and northeast Thailand. Then jumps to Arvind Kejriwal, the leader of India's Aam Aadmi Common Man Party, who reigned for a tumultuous few weeks as Delhi's chief minister, clarifies the demands of today's freshly awakened people in his book Swaraj, Self-Rule. It is now obvious that we have no control over the entire system. We cannot do anything against government employees. We have no say in government policies. There is no participation in lawmaking, little control over the parliament. Our natural resources such as water, forest and land are being thoughtlessly sold off. We have no control over that either. Is this democracy? Is democracy all about casting your vote once in 5 years and then letting these parties and their leaders rule the roost? The people want direct participation in power. The people shall take decisions, and politicians and officials will have to implement them. Kejriwal echoes what many people, disempowered by their elected representatives, feel. But are such forms of direct democracy sustainable? Can power be diffused so readily? And is the state strong enough to survive such an explosion of popular will? He then jumps to Iran and saying that, concludes by saying intense mass politicization caused in recent years by the venality and incompetence of ruling elites is turning millions of people around the world into rebels and secessionists. But they must be careful what they wish for from their irreparably weakened states and governments. History tells us that the long-term as well as immediate consequences of many of their struggles will be violence and chaos, intensified great power rivalries, the bloody redrawing of territories, and the triumph of those who can stoke most efficiently the passions of blood and soil. I'll put up a photograph of riot police standing guard at the National Anti-Corruption Commission office on the outskirts of Bangkok. And then a photograph of the selfie that was retweeted almost 2 million times in 3 hours, crushing the previous record set by President Obama after his re-election in November 2012. Twitter, of course, Samsung, Coca-Cola were the list of winners because of their product placement coups. We crashed and broke Twitter, Degeneres said later from the stage. We made history. Ellen's use of a Samsung phone for the group photo wasn't happenstance. That's interesting, isn't it? How you can leverage the new ecosystem to such good effect as Ellen did. I came across this photograph of somebody who's taken microscopic photographs of tears, trying to work out whether happy laughter and happy tears are different to sad tears. And this photograph is of tears for those who yearn for liberation. Currency markets: Euro 137.32, dollar index 80.12, Japanese yen 101.72, fell by 0.3% in Tokyo after reaching 101.20 yesterday, which was the strongest level since February 5. Swiss franc 0.8838, pound 166.58. I think you buy that on any dips. Aussie 0.8928. The decline in the exchange rate seen to date will assist in achieving balanced growth in the economy, though the exchange rate remains high by historical standards, said the RBA Governor Glenn Stevens. India rupee back over 62 at 62.115. South Korean won 1071.95, the Rial 234.40, Egyptian pound 696.07, South African rand 1087.69. The ruble incredibly traded a record low of 42.6334. That was at 6 p.m. in Moscow, of course, when in very thin markets, and the Bank Rossi was not in the market. That shows you how, when I was saying you've got to trade tactically, I think you buy Russia, but obviously it would be great to have bought some Russian rubles at that rate. The Russian central bank raised its benchmark one-week auction rate to 7% from 5.5% yesterday. Russia's foreign reserves have fallen $40 billion since May to $493 billion, according to data through February 21st. They got plenty of firepower. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, that's back up over 80. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 3-month chart of that, 137.32. And my stock remains at 133.80. Dollar yen, 101.72. I think there's an outside chance that could trade as high as 95. Commodity markets: UK gas for next month delivery climbed as much as 10%, the biggest gain since September 2011. That's on the ICE Futures Europe Exchange in London. Dutch gas for April 2014 increased as much as 10%, the most ever. German contract rose 8.1%. Natural gas supplies to Ukraine are not disrupted, said the CFO of OAO Gazprom. Everything is fine, he said in London. But I think it is that price squeeze which has squeezed gold, for example, up to 1349.715, touched 1355, the highest for a most active contract since October 30. Crude oil has been dragged higher as well, 104.72 last, rallied $2.33 yesterday for the highest close since September 19. Prices are up 6.4% this year. And WTI advanced 5.2% last month. And that was on the back of the cold weather that we saw, which boosted demand for heating fuels and crude stockpiles. I agree with this comment from Societe Generale. Oil's price surge yesterday was a knee-jerk reaction to escalating tension between Ukraine and Russia, and investor concerns of a supply disruption are misplaced. If Russia were to cut off crude oil exports through Ukraine, they would be hurting themselves more than they would hurt Ukraine. And then I'm going to put up a chart of coffee. Have a look at this. It tumbled 23% in 2013 and then has rebounded 66% this year amid the driest January in 6 decades in Brazil. Crops in Brazil suffered irreversible damage, and it's believed that losses will tip the global market into a deficit in the year starting October 1st. And then I like this dish, which was of a sea urchin from Atelier Creme. I found it on Bloomberg. 2 photographs, one of Los Roques in Venezuela, which looks a beautiful destination, and another one of palm trees in the tiny fishing village of Brito, both from photo booth, well, one from Bloomberg and one from photo booth, coming to Africa. Africa's outlook by the poor numbers. Mozambique is Africa's 8th poorest nation, says one index, and its 12th richest, says another. It's an interesting article under Sub-Saharan Africa on Rich wrap-ups about the lack of robustness about African data. South African all shares up 2.27% this year. And look at this, just 5 ShopRite stores in Angola sold more cans of energy drink Red Bull than in all of ShopRite's 382 stores in South Africa. 19 ShopRite stores sold more bottles of the ubiquitous sparkling wine J.C. Leroux than the entire South African business did. And is saying that it would be an exaggeration to say ShopRite's business at its 163 stores north of South Africa saved its bacon in the 6 months to December, but that remark would not be too inaccurate. This speaks to why the South Africans in particular are enamored with sub-Saharan African expansion. Dollar versus rand were at 10.87, and I think 11 is where we're headed back to. We were unable to break through key resistance. The Egyptian pound very steady as you like, lots of good support coming out of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, GCC. The Egyptian stock market fell 2.68% yesterday, but it remains Africa's best. It's up 15.94% so far this year. Nigerian all shares down 4.26% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange is up 12.88% this year. But a lot of those returns in Ghana have been eroded by the very weak cedi. Talk again of an acquisition of SAP Miller by AB InBev, and saying such an acquisition would give AB InBev more than $7 billion in revenue in Africa, with brands including Castle. IHS has raised $490 million for African towers. This is news that Goldman's is putting money into that business. I wrote a piece over the weekend called Corporate Earnings Above Expectations, NSE Poised Higher. I'll just reread a little bit. The earnings season is upon us at the Nairobi Securities Exchange for a reason best known to the inner and subliminal workings of my mind. I always imagine it to be a little like the Ngong races in my childhood. I remember a time watching the pre-race parade and this fellow saying, "Damn fine filly." Occasionally I find myself out of an evening and I want to exclaim, "Damn fine filly," but then I catch myself. So little like at the races, you cannot argue with the tape, and the earnings season is the tape. It gives us a fix on a company. I tend to make an effort to attend as many earnings releases as physically possible. I said about 5 years ago I discovered the extraordinary Dr. Paul Ekman, who's a pioneer in the study of emotions and their relation to facial expressions. Ekman created a roadmap for reading faces, and I have found the study of faces as useful as the study of numbers. And the point about reading faces is you need to be physically present. Ngong Racecourse, Nairobi. On that note, I'll put up a photograph of it because I've been going there since my childhood, and once went with one of Dad's clients who won every single race. Ngong Racecourse, Nairobi is really, I think, is the only racecourse between South Africa and Egypt. Diamond Trust Bank reported full-year profit after tax accelerated 28.58%. The share price has been hitting a sequence of record highs and is up 22.395% this year. After this earnings release, Diamond Trust trades on a price-earnings ratio of 8.745. Loans and advances net to customers increased 26.495%. Full-year assets grew to 166.52 billion. Total operating expenses expanded 15.041%. Profit before tax up 20.025%. Profit after tax up 28.58%. Full-year dividend up 10.526%. But earnings per share is 21 shillings and 61 cents. fully dividend is 2 shillings and 10 cents. So hoarding cash, as you can see. It's a very well managed bank, has a regional footprint and a lower base effect. At 235 plus 22.395% this year, it looks fairly priced to me. Pan Africa Insurance has rallied 55.55% this year. Reported full year profit after tax accelerated 108.32%. Dividend was hiked 50%. Earnings per share up 108.8%. Profit after tax up 108.32%. Predictably strong results, which were anticipated in a parabolic 55.55% rally so far in 2014. I think that rally up to 140 has now run its course. Rio Pynchon, it was a pleasure meeting Richard Robinau yesterday in my office. I was thinking, should I ask him for a selfie? But he was terribly proper. I don't think he would have necessarily taken me seriously enough if I'd asked. They're now offering a premium offer price of 70 shillings per share. In addition, shareholders who accept the offer will be entitled to a pro rata share of dividends or distribution of proceeds from future sale of land for up to 15 shillings per share. So basically a payout of 85 shillings a share. And Mr. Robinau reminded me that in one article I had estimated, I think it was 87 shillings. So he's, I'm within 2 shillings of the price you said. I'll put up a link for the Rio Pynchon share price data. Obviously, it's been frozen from trading for quite a while. Trade between Sweden and Kenya increased 310% from 2003 through 2012, apparently. Dr. Titus Naikuni is talking about the delivery of these exciting aircraft opens a new chapter for the airline. Carrier expects its first Boeing 787 Dreamliner on April 4. I'll put up a link for Titus at Mindspeak. The Nairobi All Shares up 3.22% this year. NSE 20 is back into positive territory. It's plus 0.13%. Yesterday there were 14 winners and 23 losers. Rare, of course, lifted the payout offer. Mumia Sugar maintained its blistering rally and has rallied 35.59% since the 19th of January through this morning. Profit takers have come in this morning. Safaricom closed at 11.70. News of the U transaction obviously caught people's attention. Scan Group closed at 50, and I for one believe that, given that WPP is in a majority, it should be worth around 60. CFC Stanbic, which reported very strong results, 70.343% acceleration in profit after tax. Counterintuitively closed lower yesterday, but I think anything around 100 looks a bit buy to me. And BAT, which reported strong earnings, and the final dividend payout of 33 shillings and 50 cents is worth 5.726% of yield and will support the price higher in the near term, I do believe. If you want to track the Nairobi Securities Exchange in real time, register on rich.co.ke. It's free, get a password, and then during trading hours, click onto Rich Live and you can watch the entire market or a particular stock if that's what you care to do. Once again, thank you.